Hi, my name is Anjali Kumar.
And I'm Eshaan Chandani.
We're students at Johnston High School. Coming up next on Iowa PBS is a documentary we made about Eunice Kennedy Shriver and the Special Olympics.
Our documentary was chosen to be a part of the National History Day research competition and selected for a specialty showcase in Washington, D.C.
Stick around afterwards for a Q&A with us.
Let me win. But if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt.
Her decency and goodness have touched the lives of many.
This woman who's made it her life's work to create opportunities for people with intellectual disabilities.
A lifetime of dedication to public service.
Your mom is one of the people I admire most in this country.
Eunice Kennedy Shriver is a pioneer who literally changed the way persons with intellectual disabilities are treated.
Let us begin the Olympics. Thank you.
For centuries, those with intellectual disabilities were treated unfairly and hidden away rather than being considered equals. But with one woman, everything changed. That woman was Eunice Kennedy Shriver. Eunice dedicated her life to breaking the barrier that separated people with mental disabilities and the general population. In July of 1968, Eunice founded the Special Olympics, an inclusive Olympics for people with intellectual disabilities. Through sports and legislation, Eunice improved the lives of people with cognitive disabilities and played a key role in driving social change that ended the inequality they faced. One woman with one vision broke the barrier of exclusion of those with mental disabilities and promoted the acceptance of millions.
People with intellectual disabilities are those who are born with developmental challenges. Throughout history and around the world, they have faced unbelievable adversity. In 500 BC, the ancient Greeks believed that mental disabilities were caused when the gods had been angered. Throughout the 1400s, Hebrews and Catholics performed dehumanizing rituals to try to rid their people of disabilities. Starting in the 1500s, those with developmental disabilities were sent away to isolated facilities called institutions. In many of these institutions, the patients lived in subhuman conditions, undergoing inhumane treatments and being restrained to their beds.
Away from communities, away from neighborhoods, away from their families. They'd done nothing wrong, but they lived in places that looked like prisons.
These institutions operated for over 400 years and were seen as the only solution until the late 1900s. In the 1960s, children and adults with intellectual disabilities still lived in the shadows of society. Most couldn't go to school, play sports, or even work a job.
They just weren't provided an opportunity. It just simply wasn't available.
There was a huge societal barrier that prevented those with cognitive disabilities from living their lives to the fullest.
Eunice Kennedy Shriver was born in 1921 in Brookline, Massachusetts, and grew up on the family farm with her 8 siblings. Her older sister, Rosemary, was born with a developmental disability, which prevented her from reaching typical learning milestones as she grew. In the early 1920s, most families sent children born with disabilities away to institutions. The Kennedys decided to keep Rosemary at home, but she was turned away from schools and could not participate in activities other children her age did.
She was discriminated against in almost everything she did, every part of life, and my mother saw that.
As Rosemary grew, her condition became worse, and like many others per the doctor's recommendation, the Kennedys lobotomized her. Unfortunately, the procedure was illegitimate and she was sent to an institution for the rest of her life. Seeing her sister's plight firsthand exposed Eunice to the adversity those with mental disabilities faced. Because of this, she became passionate about equality for others like Rosemary at a young age. Eunice visited institutions and discovered the horrors inside. Because of her public, powerful family, Eunice made developmental disabilities a more politically important issue in the United States.
Those of us who have seen children live in the shadows know that a country as rich as ours can't possibly justify this neglect.
She became the executive vice president of the Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. Foundation in 1957 at a time when females had few leadership roles. Eunice worked with the foundation to found the President's Panel on Mental Retardation when her brother, President John F. Kennedy, was in office. Her work with the panel and the foundation on behalf of people with mental disabilities gave her a platform to build on her movement.
In 1962, Eunice received a call from a frustrated mother about how she could not send her daughter to any camps due to her developmental disability. Eunice responded, "You don't have to talk about it anymore. You come here a month from today. I'll start my own camp." A genius idea was born in Eunice's head, and she began working on Camp Shriver, an athletic program that would be hosted in her own backyard. In the summer of that year, Eunice founded this inclusive day camp for those with cognitive disabilities. Camp Shriver was a success and was held every summer until 1968. Just after her 47th birthday, Eunice took her camp to the global level and founded the Special Olympics with the aid of the Family Foundation. On July 20th, 1968, the first International Special Olympics was held in Chicago.
She saw that sports and play activities could be very helpful for the development of children who were in the camp, and that's when she said, let's have a big event and let's call it the Olympics, because we're proving that these boys and girls, young men and women, are actually fantastic athletes and they deserve to be called Olympic.
However, at first, Eunice's ideas were not widely accepted. When going to a children's charity for funding, Eunice was turned away and told, "You should be ashamed of yourself for putting these kinds of kids on display."
Most people didn't think people with intellectual disabilities had any capacity.
Despite these beliefs, Eunice persevered with her movement. After the first games, the Special Olympics grew from a sports event to an organization that started hundreds of programs across the world with the goal of breaking the stigma and giving persons with disabilities better opportunities.
Everybody in life wants a place to belong, and Special Olympics gives everyone, regardless of their ability, a place to belong.
Now, over 5 million athletes from more than 190 countries compete in the Special Olympics. By breaking these barriers, Eunice not only lit a fire, she sparked a global movement.
It allowed people to see them and realize that, hey, they like to compete, they laugh, they cry, they fall down, they get themselves back up, they're determined individuals.
Eunice's vision was not just to create a sporting event, it was to open the doorway and start a movement, to put a spotlight on ability rather than disability.
Special Olympics makes me feel empowered. Not only empowered, but able.
After the first games, the public saw that these athletes were not unlike them, and they began to accept those with cognitive disabilities. Through sports, Eunice changed society's stigma against people with intellectual disabilities, making the general population more welcoming and open to protecting their rights.
Sports and physical activity are places where we meet each other without stigma, and that's the key to changing all the systems and policies and behaviors.
Eunice worked with her brother John F. Kennedy and other political leaders. In the years following the first games, tens of thousands of people with intellectual disabilities were taken out of institutions across the United States. She also pushed for the creation of many laws to protect equality. In 1971, the Fair Labor Standards Act was amended to include the rights of people with mental disabilities. In 1975, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act was signed by Gerald Ford and guaranteed education for those with intellectual disabilities. The Americans with Disabilities Act was written into law in 1990 and signed by George H.W. Bush and prohibited discrimination based on disability. In 1997, the Special Olympics saw a gap in healthcare services for persons of intellectual disabilities. In response, the Healthy Athletes program was founded and is now the largest provider of healthcare for people with mental disabilities.
Healthy Athletes is our program where we provide free health screenings to our athletes, and we also provide education to healthcare professionals.
Those with intellectual disabilities could finally participate in society, whether that meant competing in sports, working a job, or going to school.
No matter what your disability is, you can compete, and if you train as hard as you have, you can compete and you can win gold.
With Eunice Kennedy Shriver, the lives of those with intellectual disabilities were transformed. Eunice had a vision of a world where everyone was welcomed, no matter their ability. But there was a huge barrier in the way of her vision, a barrier built up by hundreds of years of exclusion and stigma. Founding the Special Olympics shattered this barrier between people with mental disabilities and the general population, and made way for a race to overall equality. After she founded the organization, there was a positive shift in the world's mindset towards people with intellectual disabilities, allowing Eunice to advocate for laws to protect their rights.
You are the stars, and the world is watching you. The right to play on any playing field, you have earned it. The right to study in any school, you have earned it. The right to hold a job, you have earned it. The days of separation and segregation are over.
One woman's vision changed the lives of those with intellectual disabilities around the globe for generations and generations to come. Every year, National History Day gives students a theme to pick topics off of, and this year's theme was breaking barriers in history. We looked into different groups and people in history that made a big impact or broke barriers, and we came across Eunice Kennedy Shriver. And her story really struck us because, one, she was an unsung hero among her family, but she really made a big change on the world, and we wanted to highlight that.
We think that she took an issue that wasn't very prevalent during that time, and then she made it something that was a really big issue and people had to pay attention to, and now they knew that change had to happen. For as big of an impact as she made, we don't really think that she's as well known as she needs to be, so we really just wanted to shed light on her work and everything that she did throughout her lifetime.
A few days before the national competition began, we got an email from the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which is a Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. We were really excited to learn that they were going to put it on their website, and that was really amazing.
In the competition, during the award ceremony, it was actually a live stream. So first we learned that we placed top 10 in our documentary category out of about 100 people, which was very exciting for us. And then after the competition was over, we learned that we placed 4th. I think that with documentaries, you can really do a very visual perspective of what your topic is. It also helps people understand really what happened because you can add video clips, you can add photos from during that time. So I think it really just adds a deeper level of understanding to your topic that you probably wouldn't have had if you maybe chose a different category.
The theme for next year is Communication in History, the Key to Understanding. So we're going to start that in a couple months and start researching and making a new documentary.